Hi, Joe. Hi there. I hope you're well. It's good to see you here. We've been here for a
Back
while,
on.
just chatting. So just want to say hello and welcome to you. You're still on mute at the moment.
I didn't get the message, so sorry.
Hi there. How are you?
All right.
Excellent. It's great to have you along here. As you can see, we got 74 people in at the moment.
Wow.
A lot of people here that are waiting to ask some questions.
That's fine.
Excellent. So if you guys, what we usually do is we usually ask the people to put their hand up in the participants window if you want to audibly ask a question. If you don't, as they have been doing already, we got some questions here in the chat notes for you, and we'll get to those as well.
Let's start either place.
Excellent. Yeah. So Deborah, would you like to go first?
Okay, because my question came up at the apropos moment when we're talking about drawing the visions we get when we're RVing, because I don't know what it is, but since I started asking questions to the universe, to the spirit, I get led into mathematics. And lately, I've been watching videos about the Fourier transform and the sine wave function. And it really caught my attention when it was said that any function can be expressed as a sum of sine waves. So, and then the videos were showing the Fourier transform being used, adding together vectors to create drawings. And you can draw anything with a combination of sine wave vectors. It's brilliant. So here you are. And the thing about what's going on is this Fourier transform can be applied in higher dimensions. So you've got quaternions in 4 dimensions. You can apply a Fourier transform to it. So you can draw things in 4 dimensions with a combination of certain waves. So when we're remote viewing, we're viewing resonances, right? We're viewing waves, and then we're drawing pictures that are given to us from our impressions of those waves. Just like a Fourier transform, like exactly.
Deborah, I just want to say you're taking a long time and it's very hard to understand you. Your microphone's not very good. I wondered if it might be easier if you type your question.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Yeah, can we get to the point a little bit faster?
Yes, I'm almost there. Like what I'm saying is there's a structure to the resonances that we receive as remote viewers. They're all in waves, and drawings that can be made from them are made by the decay rates from the pure resonances. So it's just the pure resonances that give us the drawings. So I think there's some connection between this Fourier equation and what's going on in your brain. There's a geometric, something that interprets the waves geometrically in your brain. And I have an idea what that is. I think it's in the microtubules that Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose talk about. And they are Fibonacci spirals. They have geometric construction. And this is kind of the direction I'm going with, where the action is taking place when we're receiving the signal and how it's being deciphered. It's very mathematical, and it really makes sense that it's resonances. And then if your brain is resonating and traveling through time at the speed of light, all that information.
Ma'am, we have Joe McMoneagle, who is the greatest.
We want to hear him
talk. We
want to. I'm just wondering what Joe thinks of that. What do you think of that?
Well, since you're telling me all this, I don't have much of a chance to evaluate it, but I can tell you that In remote viewing, it has more to do with whether or not you have any connection at all to the target. That's what it has to do with. And whatever that connection is. And I can tell you 50 years of research does not give us any clue as to how the information gets to us, or neither does it tell us anything about that connection. What I can tell you is that if you have connection with the target, then you're going to get whatever you need to draw things. And most of the time, most people will receive from their subconscious something very similar to whatever the target might be. And you don't want to draw what your subconscious gives you verbatim. You want to draw what it implies. In other words, if you get a picture of a swimming pool, you don't want to draw a swimming pool because it might be a sewage processing plant. You want to draw what it's implying, which is a container with some kind of fluid in it.
Yeah, like just the basic outline, the shape, which is what I'm saying is a mathematical construct. And so,
well, there is no mathematical concept. I haven't seen any proof for a mathematical concept. I mean, you could say that God's a algorithm, but there's no proof of that. So,
well, all I'm trying to say is that there's a mathematical formula that seems to outline what might be happening. That's sort of all I'm saying. It just,
okay.
It's a real process because it can be expressed mathematically.
Well, if that works for you, that's great.
Yeah, thanks.
No problem.
Thanks, Deborah. Mark, you had your hand up next. Mark Turner.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Joe. Good to see you again.
Hi, Mark.
Somebody posted a video today of this amazing man who has just an incredible memory. So he's a synesthete, right? He has synesthesia. He experiences like different flavors for different senses and stuff. And I've heard it said that remote viewers or synesthesia, people who have synesthesia tend to be good remote viewers. Now, you are a synesthete, right? Have you ever talked about that? And how do you experience this? And how do you think it flavors your remote viewing? Would you like to talk about that?
Well, I could talk about it, but it would take up the whole hour.
Well, briefly then.
Very common. Synesthesia is very common with a lot of different people. It's usually people who hear music and see colors, or when they have to count through something, they have more of a, as Deborah was just saying, more of a algorithmic or mechanical kind of issue with it. Synesthesia is common with psychics. It's also common with remote viewers, because psychics who do remote viewing are, of course, doing a remote viewing that has that they have no access to. In other words, they're doing it blind in some fashion. So it's common. That's all I can tell you. That's all we know. Some people have it, some people don't. People who seem to be, dealing with some form of synesthesia are probably more psychic than others. That's what we know right now, but that's all we know. It doesn't mean you'll be a great remote viewer. Great remote viewing comes from lots of practice and getting to understand what it is your subconscious does, what your mind does. There's lots of things you can do to improve the discipline of the mind. It's why I've always called it the martial art of the mind. But if you don't spend time polishing that capability, then your remote viewing is probably going to not be as good as it could be.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Before we move on to Kiao, just follow on what you were talking about there, Joe, with the martial art of the mind. And this is a question from David on the Reddit kind of forums. He wondered if you were ever going to publish or describe your Joe RV method. And like I say, it links in because I remember reading that you you wrote your book or something called, was it Martial Art of the Mind, a proposed training program in 1984? And I wondered if that was ever going to hit the shelves or be out there.
Yeah, I made an attempt at remote viewing secrets is the title of the book. And I talked about how I viewed remote viewing at the time, which is pretty rudimentary. It's become a lot more sophisticated over the years since I've worked now probably 3 decades with the labs doing the research, and remote viewing is a lot more complicated. The discipline of the mind that I'm talking about is if you can't empty your mind completely, then what you have in your mind is going to interfere with what you receive. If what you receive is something that isn't exactly what the target is, then you have to do some form of negotiating with your subconscious to figure out what it might represent. A lot of people think, based on the Ingo Swann methodologies that Ingo taught, Ingo said, well, the time I spent with him in the lab at SRI, what he basically, his proposal was that if you can't cut out the processing, then you don't get good information. The problem is any information you get is already processed by the fact that you understand you got it. So we have a tendency to say what we feel like it means, and in many cases we're wrong. So what happens is we assume that people are all the same in the way we receive information, and that we evaluate it the same way. And in fact, we don't. A lot of people receive information and process it differently than other people. What you have to understand is that the subconscious has no language of its own, so it borrows from the conscious mind. And so the information that's given to you is whatever the subconscious can find that's similar. And the problem is a lot of people don't have the same file system for the same information. In other words, things are different for many different people. When you say boat to someone, it doesn't mean the same to everyone. Some people will presume it means a dinghy, and some people will presume it means a yacht. And yachts are way more sophisticated than dinghies, so you get a lot more information out of yachts. But it doesn't. You have to try to form some kind of a discipline in your own mind where you have an understanding for how you process the information that your subconscious delivers to you. Do you analyze it up, or do you analyze it down? Do you go through some kind of a retro evaluation system over what your subconscious is telling you, or do you become more complicated in your evaluation of the information? What I have found, I've developed the methodologies that I use, I've developed over probably 3 decades. So it's not going to do anybody else any good. I could teach it to somebody and you'd look at me like I was nuts, but everybody has to figure it out for themselves. And that's why practice is absolutely necessary. As you practice, you find things out about how you think and why you think certain ways, and you manipulate that as in some specific format so that you come to an understanding about targets. But everybody's different. Ingo had a lot of interesting things he was pursuing, and some of them he kind of had the right slot, but he didn't have the right view of what it meant. We took all of his material to people who are professional in the way they present material. There's a whole study of things out there by professors on how they present material for a more fuller understanding. And a lot of what Ingo said might have been on in a primitive way, might have been on the right track, but he made his own interpretations of it. So it wasn't as accurate as he believed it was. And there's a lot of people that just don't agree one way or the other. So, I was with 6 viewers, and all 6 viewers did a different way of viewing. You know, they had a different way of viewing, and they had a different way of understanding what was going on in their own minds. So that's good enough.
Yeah.
If they could present it as material that was of value.
Just as a small follow-on question, I also read, and I got a report that, and I think Paul verified this, that some of your data that you did write for your your training method you proposed at the time in '84 did actually make its way into the military CRV manual as well in the beginning stages of it, I believe.
Yeah, it's true. It did, and everybody denied it. So,
Right.
you know, I presented all that back then, but everybody said, no, we didn't use your stuff. We didn't steal your stuff. We didn't manipulate it in any way. But it was used like right along with everybody else's material. In fact, the materials that are taught today that came out of the military unit have some similarity to Ingo Swann's training methodology, but they're not his training methodology. No one actually knew why he did things. He didn't keep notes. He didn't share notes. He didn't give anything to the military when they let him go. In fact, that was one of the big blow-ups between him and the military, is he refused to give over any of his training materials, and he took them with him. And so all we have is what everybody thinks he meant or thinks he was trying to accomplish. And that's one of the reasons why the military fired him, is because he didn't share any of that, and he didn't keep good records. And he wasn't about to. He wasn't going to give his methodology up. He felt it was too important, which is a very Ingo kind of thing. But, you know, I knew him. I worked with him for a long time in the lab, and he and I got along great. And it's because I never used his methodology. If I used his methodology, we probably would have never gotten along.
Yeah. Well, me and you have had a private emails on this as well, and I've expressed this to the CRV community. I've actually, I think, found enough documentation now in the Stargate archives and in Ingo's files to actually confirm what you've been saying along these lines for years as well.
Well, Dad, I'll tell you, Dad, you haven't found some of the meaner things that were said. We try not to publish or expose or share a lot of the stuff that is just angry, mean, nasty stuff that people say about other people.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was flying around at the time. So, we just prefer not to get into arguments over stuff that's BS.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
Absolutely. Still goes on today, but hopefully we can bypass that. And having so many in the community here, 77 people, all using all different types of methods here in this group, natural to trained, and so it's a good combination, and I think the community can get past that to a certain degree.
Well, the methods are fine. I have said my entire life, and anybody that knows me will validate this. I have said, if you want to do remote viewing standing on your head in a bucket of mud, whistling Dixie through a straw in your left nostril while wearing a tutu, if it works, great. That's a methodology. The only thing you have to do in order to claim that you're a remote viewer is you have got to follow the protocol that was developed in science. And there's only one, and that says you have to be blind to the target. Aside from that, there's nothing else.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks for that, Joe. Kiao, you've had your hand up for a while. Do you want to go next?
This will be quick and easy. It's really great to see you, Joseph. I wish you the best for a super long life. And I heard that you had gathered a group of viewers together because, of course, you're retired. Is there a company we can look for if we want to pay for some information to try and have them do a session?
Actually, that's a rumor, and none of it's true. I am retired, and there are a couple people that I've worked with in the labs. Oh, golly, probably 30 plus years. And there's one or two of those people that are doing some favors for me. Aside from that, I don't know of any company of remote viewers or band of remote viewers that, that you could hire or go out and have them do some work for you. The only reason I retired is because I'm tired. I've been doing remote viewing for almost 50 years, 47 years. I'm one of the few viewers that's done the remote viewing in the lab, all 3 labs. And I will still occasionally do remote viewing in the lab when we have something that we're working on that's serious. But for the most part, I've stopped doing the things like missing people, finding bodies, all these kinds of things that I just burned out on. I just get too many visits from people in different agencies, and I want to try to stop that because I'm tired.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. John A, you're up next.
Hey, Joe, how's it going?
All right.
I was just curious if you could maybe mention or discuss what your most interesting target or project or experience was, remote viewing or at Monroe. And the other question, I guess maybe you answered, was if you had any more predictions like you'd put out before, but I guess maybe you're getting away from that.
Probably the most interesting thing I ever got involved in was 14 months I spent with Bob Monroe in the lab, in his lab, learning to control out of bodies. And then the military tested me in an out of body scenario, and then they tested me in a remote viewing ceremony, situation where they tried to compare the two. I personally think the remote viewing is more valuable because you're totally blind. In the out of body sense, you can't be blind because they'll hand you a picture of a building somewhere and ask you to go find it. That's not easy. You may have to do 6 or 7 out of bodies in order to find the building. And when you find it and you produce exactly what it is they're looking for, then they think that you must have gone and researched it. So the way I dealt with that is I took an object that they wanted me to report on, and I just reduced it to about 1/4 its original size, and I reconstructed it using light fiber instead of copper wire. And they told me to never do it again, and I had to sign a whole lot of non-disclosure agreements, and it scared the hell out of them. So they don't want you doing out of bodies. I guess that's too much. It bends the rules too much. But the effort didn't fail. It worked really well. The stuff I learned from Bob Monroe worked really well. And I don't do the out of body stuff so much anymore. It's just too much work. You get something and then they say, well, that's not good enough. We really needed this. And now you got to go do another out of body and go to the same building again. So it's a waste of time and effort. Remote viewing, I like because everything's connected to everything else. There's some integral network of information that you can pick almost anything in the world, and it's all interconnected in some way to everything else in the world in some indirect way. So if you have a starting place in the remote viewing world, you can go just about anywhere and find just about anything. So, why waste your time with going out of body? It's just that the accuracy in remote viewing is sometimes extremely good and sometimes extremely bad. Probably the best target I ever did. I did a series of targets in Japan over 6 years. I looked for 28 missing people on 14 2-hour specials, and found exactly half. These were people that the police couldn't find, and neither could private detective agencies. And in fact, 2 of the people were dead, and I found where their ashes were buried. One wasn't even in Japan because nobody knew he was Korean. He'd been raised a Japanese since he was a month old. And I found his ashes in Busan, Korea. So, I mean, those are tough, really tough targets. The remote viewings for those usually average around 8 to 9 hours. And I don't usually do much except draw and talk. And and then they turn it all over to a detective agency in Tokyo. And what's funny is the detective agency is probably the best detective agency in Tokyo. And when we first started, they refused to handle my remote viewing because they said we don't do psychic stuff. They were embarrassed. They didn't want to handle it. And when they saw the first show, the head of the detective agency came over to the studio and said, now I think we could probably handle Joe's stuff. And so they make a big deal out of it, you know. My detractor said that it would have been easy to find 14 people in Japan because Japan only has 4 or 5 major cities, and most people live in the city. And what's weird about that is out of the 14 people, 9 of them were not even in Japan. They were everywhere else, but they were in China, Philippines, America, Europe. So it doesn't matter where they are. They're easy to find. Some of them still had police warrants on them, not for a good reason, but because the police thought that something bad had happened to them, and they were trying to locate them for their families. Anyway, those are the ones I'm proudest of because they were the hardest.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm. Just as an addition to that, is finding people are obviously, you know, that was a major problem within the military unit, the search problem. Is there any special technique or additional tool or anything you use to find people, or is it just your usual process?
Just my usual process. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and every turn that if I say you got to make a left turn on this road, I always draw that turn. If I say they're in a certain city, I draw at least 5 buildings to identify the city by, and I try to put the buildings where they are actually located in the city. I always draw an outline of the city, say what's surrounding it, what sits on its borders. I draw the buildings as detailed as possible and say what's around them. I always give them where the subway system runs in connection to where all the rivers and creek beds and things like that run. I put in the subway stations, usually clinics and hospitals, TV studios sometimes. I put in identifiable objects. And then I give them a starting place. I tell them exactly how many kilometers or portions of a kilometer they have to go to make turns. In one case, it was an older guy who had left his home. He was suffering from, I can't remember what the cancer was that he had, but he was suffering from a cancer, and he left his home because his family were not taking care of him well enough. And they were looking for him. And so I couldn't find where he was because he kept moving. He kept moving from house to house. And so what I did is I told him what the hospital was that he was going to for his treatment and where they should park. And the first nurse they saw, they should stop that nurse and show her the picture of him and ask her to describe where they could find him. And so they parked where I told them, and well, generally where I told them. So there was some missing bits there, but they parked where they thought I told them to park. And when they saw the first nurse, they showed him the picture, and the nurse showed her the picture, and the nurse said, "Oh yeah, I know where he lives. He lives right down the road here because he comes in here on a regular basis for treatments." And so they went down the road and rang the doorbell, and he answered the door. He was staying with a friend. So, you know, stuff like that, it just works out. When you do the viewing, you get the answers to how to find them. And that's what I do. So
yeah, thanks for sharing that, Joe. I think that's going to help quite a lot of people looking in that direction. Dick, you had your hand up next, if you'd like to go next.
Yeah, Joe Dick Allgaier, it's an honor to talk to you. If I could ask two questions, one real quick and then one a little longer. When you do this work, are you closing your eyes? Are you getting visual, experiential? You seeing it?
I see a lot of things, but I also get taste, a lot of taste. I get a lot of familiarity with the area. Taste, feeling, perceptions. It's everything. It's reached a point where it interferes with some of the things I do, because like right now when I'm talking to you, sometimes I close my eyes because I'm trying to recapture something I'm telling you about.
You just answered my second question.
Yeah,
Yeah. My next question was going to be, I heard at the time you shook hands with somebody and said, "Oh, this guy's a murderer."
You heard the story.
I heard that story, but when you sit down to work a formal target, you address it within a structured methodology, and that opens a communication pathway with your subconscious. When you do that enough, it tends to stay open. So my question is, what's the thousands of thoughts you think a day? Can you identify when it's coming from your subconscious? Can you identify those special thoughts, and what's the texture of those? I guess you're probably just doing that constantly.
Yeah, I've done this so much that all I do is close my eyes and empty my mind. And I got challenged on that while I was on one of the shows in Japan. And I made a comment. I said, when I empty my mind's completely stopped working. And somebody on the show said, that's not possible. And so they took me to Nippon University in Tokyo and introduced me to a professor there. His name is, I'm not going to remember his name now. Moriakai is his name. And Professor Moriakai has done studies of meditators for almost 40 years. And he made a comment that my comment was wrong, because he had been studying meditators for 40 years and no one had ever been able to stop their mind from working. And so I said I would demonstrate it. Well, it turns out he was one of two places in the world with 128 channel bilateral EEG. And so the next time I went to Japan, they took me to Nippon University to his lab and wired me up with 128 channel EEG. It's bilateral EEG. And when you have this equipment on, it's impossible not to measure something in the mind. The entire mind is measurable down to the brainstem that's in the base of the neck. Anything from the base of the neck up is measurable, and it's shown in different colors, which represent different frequencies. And of course, things change color because different frequencies are changing. So I gave him a plan. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into your mu metal shielded room and I'm going to close my eyes. And the first thing I'm going to do is meditate and then empty my mind. And when my mind is empty, the next thing you'll see is the mind will relight, and you'll see the input coming in for the remote viewing, and I'll do a remote viewing. And I did that. And I told him, the only thing that I will tell you is I will give you numbers for when I'm stepping in each of those windows. And so when I did this, and they filmed everything, he had a great big 80-inch TV screen on the wall where they had an outline of the skull or a head, and they were showing my brain activity in that large screen. And when I came out, everybody was dead silent. And I said, what's going on? And they said, well, have a seat. We'll replay it for you. And when I said that I was going to empty my mind, you could see the entire outline of the skull on the TV slowly drop away everything until it was completely dark. Now, does that mean my mind was shut down completely? No. There's probably something going on in there, but it's so low power that the 128 channel bilateral EEG could not pick it up. Mordecai was absolutely stunned. He had never seen that happen before. So he went in his office and he came out and he said, a great gift given needs a great gift returned. And he gave me 2 block prints off the wall in his office that I had commented on when I met him before the show. The block prints are by one of their national treasures, and you have to wait 8 years to get one. And he gave me both of them off his wall, so I have them in my office.
Do you do that as a prelude to your remote viewing session? Is that your cool down?
That's my cool down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all I can tell you is, it's a mental discipline. You work hard enough at it, you can do this stuff yourself. I mean, there's nothing really difficult about it other than doing it over and over and over until you get to a point where it doesn't, you don't command anything. It just happens. You just enjoy it. Remote viewing for me is, it's the same thing as just sitting down and drawing pictures. I mean, I don't have any problem doing it because I've been doing it for so long. I'm tired, but aside from that, it's easy stuff to do. And don't think it's perfect all the time. I get it as wrong as everybody else on occasion. And when I'm wrong, man, I'm really wrong. And I'll tell you one target I've never been able to do, and I probably never will do because I don't care, is a waterfall. I like seeing waterfalls. I don't like visiting them in the remote viewing sense.
Is that all your questions answered, Dick?
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Excellent.
Thanks, Tess.
Thanks for these guys. And Erica was up next.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And yeah, it's really great honor to be able to ask a question to you. Actually, the Calder pretty much asked my question. It was, you've done remote viewing and all forms of it for such a long time, has it become part of your DNA? And apparently, as you described, it has. A follow-up to that would be, just from my personal experience, is there any correlation that you have noticed or know any research about the dreaming, the subconscious when we are dreaming, and the remote viewing? Any correlation there?
I can tell you there's a lot of correlation to dreaming. It's a lot easier to do a remote viewing in the dream state because you're not bound by normal rules when you're in the dream state, as long as you're awake and aware in the dream state. When you're awake and aware in the dream state, it's very easy though to overdo it. If you attempt to do too many things in a lucid dream state, what happens is you start having what I call false awakenings. And false awakenings can reoccur multiple times, one after the other, to the point that you begin to wonder whether or not you're ever going to get out of the lucid dream state. If you don't have a very strong mental composition, then you're probably going to have problems with it. It'll scare you in some ways, but we attempted doing some experiments with dreaming, lucid dreaming, and remote viewing, and they were spectacular remote viewings. The problem was the recurring false awakenings, and we decided to curtail the research because it was just too dangerous for people who might not have a strong constitution.
Excuse me, to intervene, to ask. It wasn't. You didn't write it. You didn't write about it in your book, right? Because I read your book. I don't remember.
No, I did not write about that in my book.
Is this information available anywhere? Just research?
It's mostly research, but the problem is I don't
Publicly,
generally write about things or encourage things that I think are going to be dangerous. from a psychological standpoint.
Okay, thank you. The reason why I asked is because usually when I get into the mode of the remote viewing, I tend to go through my dreams for some reason. They just come in files and in fragments. So, and then there's some other correlations with the dreams and remote viewing, and that's why I asked. So thank you very much for the answer.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Alicia. And Pablo, you're up next.
Thank you very much, Joe. First of all, it's really great to have you here. And my question is more related to one of the memorable passages from one of your books where you were tasked on going to Mars, right? So I'm not going to ask about that, but if you have had any similar experience where you were, meeting something like that, or were drawn in a session, like someone was like calling you mentally and having like conversation, or simply your attention was drawn to a target you were not originally planning to do?
It depends. Sometimes the way I speak leaves one with the impression that I'm talking to people that might be in a location, but I'm not. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm talking to a higher self, and I'm inquiring in some specific direction and wanting answers, and I usually get the answers through my subconscious. My sense of what was going on in the Mars targeting was that that the people who used to be or used to exist on Mars tried desperately to save themselves through some form of long sleep or something. They tried to hibernate if they could until they could be saved, and it was a failure. The people on Mars look very, very, very similar to humans, only they were much larger. The summation of the entire remote viewing was that it was my feeling that the people that occupied Mars at one time were probably human. Given that that is true, I think that we humans are probably the true aliens on this planet. And there's a number of other reasons why I say that. And the primary ones are because it's the human animal on this planet that is so destructive to it. We don't have any care one way or the other about what happens to this planet that is our home. Even wolves care more about the home planet than we do. And the only reason why we are probably that way is because we're alien to it. We're the only animal on the planet that has lots of extraneous DNA. No other animal does. We do. So I don't think we're originating from here. In any event, the changes we would have to make right now to reverse everything that's happening to this planet is not possible. And the reason why is the only thing that's affecting the destruction of this planet right now is too many people. Too many babies are being born. So the human race, alien as it is to this planet, is not prepared to make the changes necessary to prevent the planet from trying to save itself. In other words, we're doing the same thing here that we did on Mars. So
thank you very much for sharing.
As a follow-up, Joe, have you ever been tasked or with a remote viewing of any of the other planets, like the moon or anything? Seen anything else?
Sure. Lots of stuff. It's probably on the internet somewhere. People put all my stuff on the internet. Never asked, they just put it on the internet. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I've been targeted on for other planets and stuff. I can't remember a lot of the stuff because some of it is tasked by people who have paid me a great deal of money for it. And I don't usually talk about the stuff that I get paid to do.
Yep.
I never talk about my clients ever. So if it shows up in one of my books, then it's probably worth talking about, or I'm okay with talking about it. But the things that I may not talk about are things that usually I get paid to do. And so I don't feel, I don't feel I'm at leisure for talking about it.
Yeah, that's understandable. Thanks for clarifying that. Next up is Alicia.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for your service, and also thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I have just 2 questions. So when you discuss the importance of knowing the subconscious so that it does not interfere with RV, it sounds similar to the Buddhist idea of seeing clearly through Vipassana meditation. I know Sean McNarma mentioned in one of his books about a Vipassana meditator named Dipa Ma, who, through clearing her subconscious, was able to obtain cities, such as walking through walls. Do you have experience with that type of meditation? And if not, what methods are you using to see clearly?
Well, I think the walking through walls is almost entirely an out-of-body effect. So it's not hard to do in the out-of-body state. You can walk through any wall. Doesn't matter if it's stainless steel, titanium, or wood, or anything else. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are misinterpreted by the way we see things today versus the way they were back when they were happening. I think that you could just about achieve anything you want to achieve meditatively. I'm trying to think of a way of putting it. For me, remote viewing has become an end state in terms of preparing your mind for doing a certain thing. And there's a lot of additional benefit out of that. Everything from health, pain control, to all kinds of other things. I just recently had some problems with my left femur. It turns out that it was crushed at the top, and I didn't know it. So I did 2.5 weeks of rehab walking on a crushed femur, and no one understood that that's what was going on. None of the doctors that did all the tests, they kept saying it looked like a stress fracture to them. And when they got everything straightened out and figured out what was going on, I got to have a steel rod put down the center of my femur to straighten it out. And they reconnected it to the hip with another piece of steel. But then I went back to rehab, and the rehab was certainly a lot easier. But they couldn't understand how someone could do a rehab on a crushed bone, a major bone in their leg. And it's because pain has been something I've tried to control my whole life. And so it's not something I even pay any attention to anymore. So when you break a bone, you need to pay attention to it. So it's mental discipline can take you anywhere, can do anything. It's incredible what it's capable of doing. In the martial arts, the discipline of the mind is what drives you to the top in the competition, because you know what the opponent's going to do before they decide to do it, just simply by their eyes. There's just so many things that you can learn about yourself if you can achieve the mental discipline required to do really good remote viewing. And I'm just saying that because if everybody can achieve that kind of mental discipline, then there's nothing you can't achieve. Anything you want to do. You want to write, you could be a writer. You want to do almost anything, you can do almost anything that way. So remote viewing is good in my mind for everything to include remote viewing.
Thank you. Do you think by acting in high morality and ethics, it's easier to obtain profound meditative states?
Absolutely.
Do you think?
Let me answer that real quick. There's one thing in life that you cannot delegate to anyone else ever. That's your personal morality and your personal ethics. You cannot delegate that to anyone else to make decisions for you. Anybody thinks they can do that needs to have their head examined. It's one of the reasons why working with a lot of these agencies is not as advantageous as it might seem, because if you don't, or you're not willing to delegate your personal morality and integrity, then you're going to be in a argumentative state for most of your life, especially with these agencies and things, people. It's something you want to always take care of. It's the one thing you can't give away, the one thing you can't delegate, and it's the one thing you can't fix once you've sold it. If you understand what I'm
saying. Yes, I think I do. Or I don't know.
You had another question you were going to ask.
Yeah. Do you think there's a certain, well, I think you kind of answered it a little bit, but do you think there's a certain threshold that an immoral or unethical person cannot get beyond in RV or just any psychic work? And it's a threshold that maybe is not spoken about, maybe because it's rarely obtained, or if the people that have obtained it aren't necessarily talking about it?
I think you're right. There is certain things that they will never reach without good morality and good ethics. They fail simply because they don't recognize it when it's happening. You have to maintain a good ethical and moral background in order to grow. Just grow in general. So it certainly occurs with remote viewing as well.
Sorry, I'm going to ask one more question. I apologize. So when we talk about aliens, it seems like perhaps they're operating in and maybe an out-of-body sense, or maybe some are, rather than just in body. And so the idea would be, maybe are some of them operating in like just such a higher morality level or ethics level or sense, maybe not even necessarily ethics, but sense restraint, not being so obsessed with worldly things. And so is that kind of why maybe we don't have the same visibility of them? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that that we live and share a world with other entities, certainly, and we might call them alien. I happen to think that we're alien to this world, so there's no reason why there wouldn't be other aliens on this planet. We just don't know who they are or what they are. I think there's animals that live in our atmosphere the same as they live in the oceans. You know, we have some pretty big animals living in our oceans that we don't see very often. And so the atmosphere is probably the only thing larger than the oceans. And there's certainly something living in our atmosphere. They don't communicate with us. We don't communicate with them.
Oh, thank you so much. And I hope you end up doing remote viewing 3 at the Monroe Institute.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks for the answers as well, Joe, on that one. Mandy, you were up next. You're muted at the moment, Mandy.
Good evening, Joe. Or should I say good afternoon for you? I was privileged enough to work with you at the Monroe Institute in 2019.
Okay.
Which is exactly 2 years ago this month. Okay, my question is, if there is no time and space between the remote viewer and the target, is it possible to bring back physical objects?
I don't know of anybody that's ever brought back a physical object. I think it's absolutely possible to create a physical object once you've seen it. So if you can remote view something somewhere and you decide you want to build it, there's no reason why you can't. I've done remote viewings of targets that in their evaluation, they were able to determine exactly what they were, what they did, and they were able to recreate them almost exactly the way I described them. So I don't see any reason why that's not possible. I don't think I'm telling anybody any secrets out there. You know, if I could go somewhere and find something and copy it, well, I already did, but I got in trouble for it. It's not a good thing.
Okay, and the other question I'd like to ask, I know I'd only asked the one, but there's the other question is, do you think that aliens are actually our etheric selves?
Our etheric selves?
Yes.
No, I would think that I would first believe that they're probably time travelers and they're here from our future first, before I would believe that. Our etheric selves, it seems to me, would have no interest whatsoever in talking to our non-etheric selves. Why? What would be the benefit? They already know what we are. So what would be the benefit for that? Would they be trying to improve us? No, I doubt it. You know, I just don't see any benefit there.
No, maybe educate us, maybe.
If I could be more etherically alive and doing what I'm best trained to do, then I wouldn't be here talking to me. I'd be off doing something better, something more valuable or something more reasonable.
Interesting.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it does, yes.
I see it the opposite direction of the way you're asking it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, guys. And next up was Chris.
Hi there. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks so much for putting those shows on, those weekly podcasts, Daz. It's much appreciated. I'm fairly new to remote viewing. I've been doing it for about 3 years, and I'm still trying to come to terms with the whole thing. But my question to you basically is, how do you see the future? Like, is it set in stone or is it not? Because before I went into a session once, I just asked what the target was, and I instantly just knew it was going to be, I knew two things. I knew it was going to be a wolf, and I also knew that this particular target was not the wolf, but that would be a different target that I would do later that same day. And that turned out to be actually the case. So for me, that means that the future was already predetermined, right? So after your almost 50 years of experience, I was just wondering, where do you stand when it comes to the future being set in stone or not?
The future's never set in stone, but it's possible to know what the future is. I know that sounds like a dichotomy, but it's not. The future is really probability of a lot of different parts and pieces coming together the right way. A lot of times we think it happens that way because we get a very shallow view of what the future's going to be. And when it turns out that way, we assume that we know all about it, and we don't know anything about it. It's possible to know what the future is going to be to a certain degree. It's also impossible to know what variation of it's going to occur. Like I said, I've been wrong more times than not. It's scary how many times I've been wrong. And so there's no perfection in remote viewing. If you expect perfection in remote viewing, you're going to be very, very disappointed. You got to understand something about remote viewing. Remote viewing was never designed to tell you anything about what it is you're looking at. It was never designed to be the answer to what you're viewing. It was never meant to be seeing anything. It was meant to be perceiving information. Remote viewing was designed to, in a collective way, provide bits and pieces of information about something that gave you more insight to some extent on how it might be used, why it might be used, who is doing it, why they might be doing it, that sort of thing. It was never intended to be an answer unto itself. In other words, a remote viewer that's targeted on a newfangled plane that the Russians might build was never expected to describe the Russian plane in absolute detail and tell you all the things you want to know about it. It was meant to forewarn us about different bits and pieces of the Russian capability that might be a threat or might not be a threat, that kind of thing. Remote viewing is not about like you want to know how the Great Pyramid was built. So let's target the Great Pyramid and find out how they put it together. That is not going to happen with remote viewing. Remote viewing is something that would be, you would target the Great Pyramid with in order to understand maybe why the Great Pyramid was built at all. Some insight as to how the stones might have been put together. Some insight about what the countryside was like or the political situation was like that enabled someone to build a Great Pyramid. Things like that. It was designed to be used for intelligence collection. It was never designed to be used for answers in their totality about anything. So the probability of getting that out of remote viewing is very, very small. It's capable of producing information about minute things because it's the way it operates. It allows the subconscious mind to be knowledgeable about bits and pieces. It does not allow the human mind to put everything together in a righteous way to tell you exactly why something is designed the way it is or how it came out the way it is or anything like that. It was to give you insight that we don't know or probably don't know yet about threat theory, that sort of thing. Remote viewing, I think, is probably the closest thing to creativity that you can get. In other words, a really good remote viewer is going to be creative. Creativity is something that allows us to improve ourselves or improve our environment or something like that. It's not an end all to anything. In other words, it's possible that somebody can produce information in remote viewing that tells you something of incredible value if it's a threat, but beyond that, it doesn't give you much of anything. Yeah, I mean, look at what works. How many people have been able to target something specifically and not only describe it in perfect detail, but talk all about the reason why it was made, who it was made for, and that sort of thing. I would tell you, if someone does that as a remote viewer, I'd be very suspicious of their source of information. Bits and pieces, that's what remote viewing is good for. If you get really good formative bits and pieces that tell you something unusual about something, you're doing really well as a remote viewer.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Thanks for that one. And next up is Carl, I believe.
You know, if Christopher would like to go ahead, Joe actually just kind of answered my specific question just now.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Do you want to go ahead then, Christopher?
Yeah, go ahead. Hey, thanks. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
All right.
So I'm kind of nervous, but I guess so I've been doing remote viewing for about maybe going on 3 years. Before that, I was doing like the silver mine method for several years. I guess it's kind of in a nutshell, self hypnosis. I just hemi-sync, binaural beats. I've been really enjoying those quite a bit, and those have been helping me a lot with meditation at night. As far as the hemi-sync goes, I guess would you recommend like maybe, I'm not sure, not so much continuing it, but maybe like using it like as a, not so much as a cool down, but as a
what's nice, I'll tell you what's good about HemiSync, and the reason I started out using it is HemiSync creates a blend of frequencies in the brain that equate very similarly to a state of mind where it's very close to being in what I call an uncontrolled state, or a state where you're open to things, where you're not predisposed to think a certain way. It's a very meditative state, and that's from the 10 state all the way up. And I may not agree, or I may not agree that some of the frequencies they talk about are doing what they say they're doing, but the certainly the 10 state is a very meditative type of state when you're listening to it. The nice thing about the HemiSync is when you listen to it frequently enough, you can actually throw it away after a while, because what happens is you become entrained to it. In other words, what you would measure with an EEG will occur just simply by closing your eyes and remembering what the sound was.
Okay.
So that you reach a certain level of entrainment. Well, that certain level of entrainment is what you want to achieve as a remote viewer, because that's where your mind is allowed to present the information you're looking for, whatever that might be. I'm not sure we can dictate what it will be, but it's the very state that you want to be in, so that your mind, your subconscious, can receive information that it can deliver to the conscious mind to play with. And it will happen more frequently when you've been entrained to the use of the 10 state in the HemiSync. Now, given that's true, you can use probably any meditative sound, any sound that's been developed over the years by anybody for achieving a meditative state, to do the same thing. Once you've gotten to a point where you can just close your eyes, remember what it sounds like, and it just, your brain just locks right into that same shared frequency response, then it takes care of itself. That's a condition you want to be in when you get information from your subconscious. And so if you want to be there for a start, then that's what you want to do. If you want to work at it and learn some state on your own, or develop some other methodology in your own head, then don't use it. But I found that it helps immensely in terms of cool down and prepping you on being able to recapture a certain place in your head that you want to be in from a thought standpoint. You can go from there to almost anything. Certainly Bob Monroe went from there to being out of body, so I suspect it could be used for almost anything.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks for that, guys. Dimmy, would you like to ask what you want?
Hello, thank you for being here, and I'm admiring very much you. I'm asking about your book about the ultimate time machine. You have on the opening quote from Seth Material about that you are forming the future, but you are also forming the past. So one of the questions is, can you elaborate on that about the past? I mean, and the second one is, what's your take on Seth Material, generally speaking?
One of the problems you're faced with when you start talking about future or past, the farther back you go in the past, the more difficult it is to understand, simply because we don't reside there. We reside in a different time period. But you go far enough into the past, with a lot of effort and work, you can figure out kind of how the development took place that got us from there to where we are now. So there's some value in looking at the past and looking at things that have happened in the past, simply because those things exist, or we wouldn't be where we are right now. Going into the future is way more difficult. And the reason why is, if you go too far into the future, or just far enough, in many cases, you could go a month into the future and be in just as much trouble as you would be going into 1,000 years into the future. But you go far enough into the future for some targeted reason, and the concept that allows whatever that targeted reason might be to exist, we don't understand. In other words, look at it this way: if we were targeting something in the future that we want to know about, let's say, I don't know, faster than light travel, there's a lot of hypothetical things about faster than light travel that may or may not be true. Some are proven in principle, some aren't. Some I wouldn't know how to prove. But if you go there and you look at things like faster than light travel, the difficulty is the concept that supports it doesn't exist yet. In other words, nobody's worked out the rules and the engineering requirements. So we lack big chunks and pieces of understanding for why it might even be possible. It's extremely difficult to pick things out of the future that are going to tell us what is possible and what isn't possible, because we just haven't engineered it to that degree yet. So we don't know what is possible. So going to the future is extremely difficult because things just haven't been worked out yet. Hypothetically speaking, no one's made it happen yet. So how do we know? You know, that kind of thing. Just very complex, very difficult to isolate information by going into the future that tells us anything of value, because we just don't understand how the future is put together. The concepts don't exist yet. That kind of issue. But you might get lucky going in the future. I don't know. It's the reason why the future is so difficult to predict. The concepts don't exist yet. And if the concepts did exist, we don't understand how to bring them together to make it do what we want it to do. So I think it's a waste of time, personally. I gave it a good shot and it didn't work. So, or at least most of it didn't work. I don't need to know about the future. The future's bad enough. Now it's bad enough. Future is even worse, probably. I don't know.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much.
Joe, do you still have 5 or 10 more minutes to answer some of the questions I have in the chat here?
Let's do 2 more and then I got to go, and we can do this again sooner than later.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. The first one is actually from Dimi. She asked earlier, and she would like to know your point of view on any taskers' biases, beliefs, or concerns in relation to the target, and if this extends to the remote viewer at times.
Say that again.
She would like to know your point of view on any task or biases or their beliefs or concerns about the target, and if that extends to the remote viewer and they pick up on that.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any biases affecting it. The only way the bias could affect it would be if you're wondering what they want to hear. And that shouldn't be your tasking. My tasking, I will tell you, I have a tasking thing that I give myself, because most of the time when somebody comes and wants me to do a remote viewing, the tasking they give me is wrong. They don't know a thing about tasking. I've been studying tasking now for probably 30 years in the lab. So tasking is a really complex problem. So I've decided to give myself a tasking that I use whenever I feel like I'm not getting anything through the tasking the person gave me, the client gave me. The way I think of it is this: let me give them something that's going to make them really happy. That seems to work really well. Do they get what they want? Almost in every case. Is it something they already pre-believe? Probably.
Excellent. Well, let's leave it there then, Joe, because you've been gracious to give us an hour, and on behalf of the 70-odd people here, I want to thank you for this and answering the questions, and for all the years you've been doing the RV and helping us out in your books and all the information and all your service.
Well, you're welcome. I understand something. I don't know everything. The things that I can quote to you and say to you that I know to be true are what I've seen proven in science. We just published 4 volumes of the science. It's 1.4 million words. They trimmed it down from 1.8 million words. It's 45 years of the science of remote viewing. And if you have ideas you want to...
I have them here.
Yeah, if you have ideas you want to think about, well, buy these volumes and look at what you're thinking about in there first, because it's probably been done. And it's either failed or it's been successful, or it hasn't been done yet and hasn't been tried. But, take the time to go to a library and ask if they have these 4 volumes. That would be an even better thing, because then other people can check them out. But check the science out and find out whether or not they've already explored that or not. In all probability, they have, because the science is over 50 years old. People come up with great ideas and they go, well, why can't it be this way? Well, I can tell you, the science probably says it can't be, for very good reasons. And given almost any question, you can go into the science and find a reason why it probably is or probably isn't, or that it's never been investigated. So that's my recommendation. In any event, and try to have fun with remote viewing. Everything becomes so serious with some people. You don't want to do that. Have fun with the remote viewing. You won't get as frustrated. You won't get as angry with yourself, and you do a lot better. Okay, just have fun with it.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for those final points.
Yeah. I'll talk to you again, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and everyone, Joe's right on those. They're amazing books. I've got those. And they put the Stargate files online many years ago, but they're so messed up. These books, putting them in such a coherent order, and all the feedback and all the information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's really funny about the books is everything in the science of remote viewing was no foreign, means no release to foreign nationals. Yeah. And one of the 2 senior editors who put the science all together is a foreign national.
Excellent. Anyway, thank you, Joe, for sharing all the time with us, and thanks for coming along.
Anyway,
Hopefully we can do this again.
I think that's a riot. Yeah. Talk to you later.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for all the great questions as well. Take care and have a good weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
See
you.
you
Thank
soon.
you, Des.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.